All right, people. So I'm gonna give you guys a reaction video, right? Towards Mr. Headcanon. I'm gonna put the original video in the description below, and we're gonna react to why Invincible can't have better animation. All right. So without further ado, we're gonna dive into this. Right before we get started, I do a lot of different character designs. I am an artist, so if you have any suggestions of character designs you guys want me to do, just throw it in the comment section down below, from anime, Marvel, DC, whatever characters that you guys want me to create. All right, enough of my shameless plug. Now let's actually dive into this. Put on the audio so you guys can hear it, all that good stuff, and let's get it started.
Invincible Season 1 looked like this. Season 2 looked like this. And Season 3 looks like this. Somehow, the animation got worse with each season. There's less use of lighting and shadows, the backgrounds have fewer details, the character designs and expressions are simpler, and there are way more static scenes. In Season 3, they even reused...
Look at that. Dang, that is crazy. So what he is gonna say is that they reused animation. So I'll tell you from my own experience, I've dabbled upon animations, not so much of flash animations, of more of stop animations, where you pretty much already done the character design, but all you're doing is just different head, different face expressions, different arms. And you pretty much gotta rig out, which is rigging, which you're moving the limbs, like the arms, the legs, the head, right? Different positionings, right? That's the character designs in terms of like animation. I'm saying character design. That's the animations that I've done, right? So this right here is more like flash animations, where you got to draw it. You use like low down opacity, and you got to redraw things and draw it over and over and over. So hence the reason why a lot of times, even with Japanese anime, they will reuse certain shots, because otherwise, you know, you're going to overwhelm yourself, right? So a lot of times you got to work smart and not always work hard.
shots from Season 2, thinking we wouldn't notice. But how is that even possible? How can the writing keep getting better while the animation gets worse? It's almost funny how fans can recreate scenes from the show with even more detail, smoother movements, and stronger personality.
And you can see like with color grading. So what is happening here is that they're setting the tone. And a lot of times with movies, right, even with anime, with Japanese anime, or even like not a modern era, like Castlevania, all that type of stuff, or Avatar, Legend of Korra, all of these things where they're taking inspiration from the Eastern culture, putting it into the Western culture, right? You're starting to see a lot of color grading. A lot of these things, like movies and all that stuff, they set the tone. So they add color overlay to emphasize emotion. So that way it creates more of a dramatic, emotional scenery, as opposed to things being extra flat. So Invincible is missing that, but in my opinion, I still enjoy the fluidity of the animations whenever they have incredible fight scenes that are very important to the plot.
These fan-made scenes have a cinematic feel, like they're straight out of a big-budget Hollywood film. You might prefer a different style, but there's no denying that they stand out more than the original scenes, which look flat and lifeless. Sometimes it looks like they're sliding a PNG across the screen.
Unacceptable.
We can explain Invincible's poor animation with just two words: money and time, the two things Invincible doesn't have. You might think it's a multi-million-dollar show just because the Prime Video logo appears in the intro, but in 2023, Marge Dean, one of the executive producers, said that Invincible had only a quarter of the budget of The Boys. That show costs $11 million per episode, which is already on the low side for a top-tier series. To give you an idea of what Prime Video usually spends, Citadel costs $50 million per episode, and Ring...
50 mil per episode. Wow.
Rings of Power costs $58 million. If we take Marge Dean's statement seriously, we'd have to divide 11 by 4, which leaves us with just $2.75 million per episode. Financially speaking, that's monopoly money. I know it seems like a huge number to us regular folks making minimum wage, but keep in mind that those $2 million cover the total budget for each episode. That money isn't just for the animators. It also covers the writers, directors, composers, editors, colorists, and voice actors who take a big chunk of the budget.
And most importantly, voice actors, especially in the show. You have B-list, some A-list celebrities. So it's not just popular, well-known voice actors like Steve Bloom, or I can't think of others off the top of my head right now at this time of this recording. There's a difference between that voice actor and someone who is actually an actor that's doing voice acting, right? Obviously, that requires a higher budget because of that.
Invincible has some very well-known actors who probably get paid really well, like Steven Yeun and J.K. Simmons. That $2 million isn't enough to hire the best animators out there. And there's also not enough money to expand the team and get more people working on Invincible. A show like this should have a massive team because the comic is packed with action, explosions, and superpowers. But seasons 2
and give credit to Invincible, the animated series. It actually looks pretty close to how the comic book looks, minus the extra lights and shadows, but the likeness of the characters are pretty accurate for the most part.
2 and 3 only had about 10 animators per episode, the same number as X-Men 97. That show looks way better than Invincible, but Marvel was able to pull off that level of detail and smoothness because its episodes are half the length. Invincible's episodes are 40 minutes long, double the standard runtime for animated TV shows.
Try the double Sonic Smasher and at half
Get
price
it? Double?
app. Live free, eat Sonic.
Double! I can't be eating all that stuff. I can't even skip it. Well, you know what?
It's a free Chrome extension that blocks ads on all your favorite sites.
All right, let's go.
In an interview with Bleeding Cool, Marge Dean said they have to create twice as many assets as a normal animated show because Invincible has tons of different designs, models, and backgrounds.
Do you guys remember back then with Avatar: The Last Airbender? I remember when I was younger, and there was times where I think it was like book 3. Man, they had so much breaks, man. It was like just a few episodes, and you got to wait a few months, damn near like 2-3 years for the animators to catch up. And then they'll give us a few episodes from there, and then they take another hiatus. And from a, fan consumer perspective, being ignorant, I'm like, why is it taking so long? How come they can't just do this and that? Oh, anime is a lot faster. Well, number one, a lot of the times with animations in Japan, a lot of them, they have no social life. I'm telling you, even from manga to even animators, it's like their life is inside of the studios. You know what I'm saying? Like they sleep in the studio if they have to meet the deadline. So when it comes down to Americans, a lot of times they will outsource, but the main focus in-house, it takes them a while, like just to make frame by frame by frame. You thinking 10 animators is enough? No, you need way more than that. Way more. Shout out to all the independent artists out there who do their own animations. I follow some of them, subscribe to some of them on YouTube. It takes them years for like a 5-minute video that's animated because they're doing it by themselves. Like that's a lot of work. You think like, imagine like the Matrix. You're like frame, every little frame is a drawing. It will drive you nuts. And it drove me nuts a little bit. And I'm doing stop animations where the design is already done. I'm just moving the arms and moving the legs or whatever, or moving the head. And that's tedious. So imagine redrawing characters and then adding background scenery and so forth. Again, shout out to the animators because they don't get enough credit.
And with a small team, that's really tough. Even the show's animators explain this in comments like this one. This user says they worked on the compositing team for seasons 2 and 3, and that they wish the show had a level of detail similar to Arcane or Castlevania. But
let me go back. I want to actually read it because he just put it here. All right, I'm going to read it. I actually was on the visual effects compositing team of Invincible for season 2 and 3. I appreciate the level of polish you've attempted here. Trust me when I tell you there are a lot of sequences where we would have wanted to take a final look at this level, but with most episodes having upwards of 200 plus FX shots, this just isn't feasible given the delivery timeline. Also, the team was comprised of about 4 people, including the editor. Maybe if we had 10 plus compositors all taking shots, then maybe, but with such a small team, it wasn't possible. Also, you have to consider the overall tonal look of the show is up to the art director, who has final say over how much or how little compositing / lighting is done to each shot, because then you veer into potential inconsonance and consequences with Kirkman's overall aesthetic vision of Invincible. So yeah, pretty much what he's saying is that they have a compliance. So even though, number one, they have lack of time, and number two, they don't have the creative freedom of doing certain shortcuts to make it look aesthetically appealing, because they have to answer towards Robert Kirkman's answer to his last say, because it's his baby, right? So that's one thing that he's pretty much saying. And I have to give a shout out to, like I said, the animators also in the Eastern, with Japanese animations. It seemed like they're all like synchronized Michael Phelps swimmers, because it just seems like, man, they all just perfectly synchronized sometimes, like if you see from the average, like just viewing it. But if you're someone who's a huge fan and you could see some of the differences between this person of this art style in this episode compared to this art style in this episode, it's the average person won't even know the difference, because they're like synchronized swimmers. But yeah, it's one of those interesting things where a lot of artists think that, oh, you're creative, you could do this and that. But in reality, when you work for a company, you don't really have that much creative freedom. You have to listen to and oblige by the rules of the compliance of whoever's in charge. So always keep that in mind if you want to jump into animations. You got to really have a love for it and also have a tolerance of dealing with revisions and tight deadlines.
They worked on the compositing team for seasons 2 and 3, and that they wished the show had a level of detail similar to Arcane or Castlevania. But that was impossible with such a small team. There were only 4 people in their department, including the editor.
Only
Just
4?
4 people to handle over 200 shots per episode. To help you understand why this is so important, compositing is the stage where all the elements on screen get put together. The characters, backgrounds, and effects. This is also where lighting, shadows, and filters are added to make the final image look good, like in this scene from season 1. But if there's no time to work on the stage, the composition will be basic, and the characters will look pasted onto the background with no depth at all, like slapping PNGs onto a static photo. Compositing is what sets these two images apart.
I think I just learned something.
If Invincible had more than 10 VFX compositors, it would have looked way more cinematic. But to have
see how cinematic that looks, and look, this is the original, and then look at when they composite.
The show's budget would have,
man, it's so fast. Jeez Louise.
Have needed to be.
So when you add that, it creates a feel and emotion. I just call it overlay color grading. There's different terminologies, but there's compositing. All right, they also use that terminology in film, compositing. So creates that emotion.
Be bigger, like way bigger. Arcane, for example, had a budget of $14 million per episode.
Arcane needs that because it's 3D with 2D elements. So if it didn't have that, it would just look very, very unfinished.
5 times more than Invincible. And Across the Spider-Verse, which is one of the best animated projects ever, cost $110 million. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the film's directors, said their team had over 1,000 animators from all over the world. Invincible has just
1,000 animators compared to Invincible that only have 10. Wow. 100 times the amount. That's crazy.
10 animators per episode, and some episodes have even fewer. It's not that these animators lack talent, skill, or motivation. They just can't keep up with the workload. I know this won't be a popular opinion, but we should actually be grateful that the show looks the way it does, and not way worse. The real culprit is Jeff Bezos and the execs at Prime Video, who didn't want to invest properly in the adaptation of...
I want to say, spoiler alert, well, it's not even a spoiler with season 3. The last 2 episodes, the animations was so fluent. It reminded me of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. Like, it actually felt like it was a bit mocapped in a good way, because it was so, like, just all of the aerial scenes, them getting hit, turn around, get hit right there, the spinning momentum of all the debris. It's just, it was a beauty to watch, honestly. So it definitely felt like anime, like Dragon Ball Z. But to me, even better. Because you know with Dragon Ball Z, they'll take shortcuts of like quick lines as they both like hitting each other, boom, 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 whatever. But like here, you get more of these intricate angles. You know, like I said, it reminded me of the combination of Dragon Ball Z mixed with like Legend of Korra. Not high Legend of Korra status like level, but it's not too far off, honestly. So definitely check it out. The last 2 episodes of season 3
of one of the best superhero comics ever.
Cheapness is not a sense.
And I already know what you're thinking. None of this explains how a fan managed to do this from their own home, or why the teasers look way better than the full episodes, or how Demon Slayer looks infinitely better despite having a budget of just $80,000 per episode. That's only 4% of Invincible's budget. Wasn't a huge budget supposed to be necessary to do things right? It is, but that's where time comes.
Well, we have to look at the difference between the yen versus USD, and also in terms of the economy of how much the cost of living in Japan compared to US. So they're able to pay them a lot less, but they can still make a living off of that money compared to how big capitalism is in the US. And also a majority of their stuff is in-house, and they have incredible artists, you know. And with the US, you have that too, but again, their work ethic when it comes down to like, we need this right now, I don't care, figure it out mentality, it definitely shows in the final product.
Comes in.
Yeah. Speaking of product, what is this?
Season 1 was in production for almost 3 years, from 2018 to 2021. Even with a small team, they had enough time to create beautiful animations like this one,
Hey,
and
look at
put
that.
more
Wow.
effort into compositing, which is the weakest part of the later seasons. Of course, they use classic tricks to save time and money, like using CGI for backgrounds and vehicles, or hiding...
That's working smart. I mean, Eastern anime, they do the same thing with vehicles. I don't have a problem with that. It's, to me, I look at it like it's a prop, you know? So no, unless the vehicle, like let's say like X-Men, when they have their vehicle craft or whatever, like unless the vehicle has a strong characteristics that ties into the story, if it doesn't have that, work smart. Just use already made 3D vehicles.
characters' mouths in less important scenes, so they only had to animate the eyes when they're talking. But that happens in every animated show,
That's
even the
smart.
ones with way bigger budgets.
Makes
and
it more dramatic.
I know there were a few infamous scenes, like this one, that turned into memes.
Ooh.
But the fight scenes, the ones that needed the most movement and energy, were good. They knew how to hide the lack of budget and staff, and the same thing should have happened in Season 2, but that wasn't the case. It took them 2.5 years to release Season 2 at the end of 2023, and they even split it in half. We had to wait 4 more months for the last episodes, which only dropped in March 2024, and the result was worse than Season 1.
That doesn't make any sense.
But actually it does, because they switched to animation studios between seasons. Season 1 was made by a coalition between Skybound, Robert Kirkman's company, and Winsun Sky, a studio in Vancouver. They had teams in LA, and even hired some freelance animators from Korea and Japan, which is pretty common for American shows. But when Prime Video renewed the series for Season 2 and 3, Skybound decided to build its own animation division, to be independent. They hired Marge Dean to create Skybound Animation and put her in charge of producing Season 2. That decision impacted the entire schedule.
That just looks like more of a, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems more like a budget cut. They wanted to make things more in-house, so they don't have to spend a lot more money outsourcing different people. So they want to keep it consistent by just relying on less of a crew and just focusing on just one, like I said, like self-explanatory, in-house.
Marge Dean said that when she joined Skybound, she had to start everything from scratch. There was no studio, no staff, just Kirkman, Corey Walker, the comics artist, and Simon Rasiopa, one of the executive producers. They had to hire new animators and set up a physical studio in LA, which was complicated by the pandemic. The animators only really started working in 2022, so they had way less time than they did for Season 1. This was confirmed by Katrin Snodgrass, one of the people in charge of the storyboards for Seasons 2 and 3.
I was hired as a storyboard revisionist in April of 2022 to work on the Adam Eve special. It actually took only a year, and we made 2 seasons at once.
Meanwhile, Skybound outsourced the teasers to Balak, the co-creator of
See the difference? They outsourced the teasers to lure you in. But as far as like the interior, as far as like episodic is concerned, everything is in-house. So that creates a lot of discrepancy as far as the viewers, because they're expecting this, but then they get something else. Think of it like you see a fancy comic book cover, you're like, wow, that cover is amazing. I'm going to assume the interior of the comic book is like that. Nope, two different artists. Right? You got comic book cover, different artists from the interior.
Lastman. That's why the teasers have mappa-level animation. A separate team worked exclusively on 2 short teasers, while the main team worked on the full season. Prime Video tricked us with these animation changes, but expecting this level of quality for every episode would be...
And even with there, you got color grading for that, right? Like, you see the overlays, the compositing. It's night and day with the way that looks. Look at that, like, just night and day. Because they had more time to just work on something that was only like, what, 2-3 minutes long compared to like hours and hours of animation.
Mappa-level animation. A separate team worked exclusively on 2 short teasers, while the main team worked on the full season. Prime Video tricked us with these animation changes, but expecting this level of quality for every episode would be
that was
ridiculous.
a bait and switch.
We're comparing a 2-minute teaser to an 8-episode season where each episode is 40 minutes long. Besides, we can't underestimate the power and passion of a studio that's all about making horny furry stuff.
I'm a little turned on.
Back to the show. Switching animation teams between seasons affected the overall style. They used less CGI and went for more hand-drawn scenes. But since they had less time to work, some scenes ended up looking way too static. The best example is the battle between Omni-Man, Mark, and the Viltrumites on Thraxia. It should have been one of the best moments in the entire show, at least up to that point. But half of the fight felt like a slideshow, and the composition wasn't as polished as in Season 1. They had to split the season in 2 because they just couldn't keep up. Kirkman justified the split by saying they didn't want to release episodes during the holidays, and that they wanted Invincible to have a new season every year. But Rasiopa admitted they made the decision while production was already underway because they ran into problems. No one on the team wanted to say exactly what went wrong, but it's no coincidence that episode 4 had the worst animation in the entire show. I have no doubt that they were running out.
They was getting, in translation, they was getting burnt out, and it was reflecting upon the quality of the work. So they needed to reel back and give them a breather, let them go on a little bit of a vacation, give them like a week or a few days off, let them refresh, let their eyes, get healthy away from seeing every little frame by frame by frame, let them recuperate and come back and, fix and polish up the work. It happens, when you're in the design field, whether it's character design, concept artists, graphic design, it's all the same thing. You gotta go through certain situations where you gotta burn yourself out. You're a human being, right? You gotta burn out, and you gotta need that time of rest your eyes. People think, oh, this is easy. You just sit on the computer and do it. Nah, it's a mental, stressful game, especially when you have people breathing down your neck because other people are breathing down their neck. So now all of the pressure is on you, and it's like hot potato. And even if you are not an artist, it's the same thing working 9 to 5. Like, you're dealing with these really tight deadlines. And a lot of people get the misconception that, oh, but this should be fun. This should be creative. People think fun is easy. No, fun is a lot of times fun is labor. It is intense. Not all the time is going to be fun. Sometimes it's quite difficult. The only fun part a lot of times is when it's over and you get to reap the fruits of your labor and see how much work you have accomplished through the amount of months and damn near years of torture, and then you just go right back into doing it again. It's a weird vicious cycle, but this is why you got to have a passion for it. Only the few can do that.
Out of time and had to delay the last episode simply because they weren't finished yet. If you don't believe me, listen to what Kirkman said in an interview with The Ringer. Coming from the live action world, I'm like, animation is like comics. There's no budget. We can do whatever we want. It's not exactly true, which is possibly the reason for some of our delays, because we had a big appetite and unrealistic expectations, and those kinds of things take time. That's the key word, time. The fan who reworked the composition of these shots said it took them 4 hours per shot. And earlier I mentioned that each episode has over 200 shots. That means at least 800 hours of work per episode just for compositing, an absolutely insane amount of time. Japanese studios can pull that off because their animators literally work 20-hour days. There have been cases where they had to sleep in the office, like what happened to Cloverworks staff.
Just like what I said before, they're able to push through it because they sacrifice a social life. They have no social life. You want to talk about a machine? They are machines. They will outwork you all day. You know what I'm saying? But what makes it work for them is that they're like family. They all work together. Like this is their family, literally. While with, the Western culture, we like to have a work-life balance. We don't want to work on weekends. We want to enjoy time spending with our friends, but with them, it's like, nah, like that is their family. This is 20 hours. They only go back home just to sleep for a little bit and then go right back to the studio. In fact, a lot of times they sleep in the studio. So think of it like, kind of remind me when I was in college, I was in art school, we had to do all-nighters, because we was on a tight project deadline. So me and my other classmates, we were just all in the lounge. We call it the lounge. And we would just literally stay there all night just to complete certain projects. Our eyes would be red. And we're just like groggy. Like it's the feeling as if you're drunk, but you're sleep drunk. Because it's like you didn't sleep at all. But at the same time, as much as that sound like torture, it was like brother in arms. It's like you wasn't alone. You're there with everybody else. So it kind of feels like we're all family going through it. I know I sound like Vin Diesel, family, Fast and Furious, but that the amount of I don't know how to fully describe the feeling of it to fully articulate it, but it's like you get the good with the bad, and you have that with everybody else going through the same adversity. So it kind of encourages you to push forward, and then that's the thing. I guess they go through that type of lifestyle compared to the Western culture where we're like, no, I clocked out. That's it. I'm not staying up all night. I got a life. That's the biggest difference. So you can see it with the quality and how fast they're able to push out amazing animations compared to the Western animations.
During the production of Wonder Egg Priority. Sure, Japanese studios deliver better results for less money. Shows like Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, and Dandadan have way better animation than Invincible. But they pull it off by overworking their animators to the extreme. Yeah. They work in miserable conditions for ridiculously low wages. That doesn't happen in the US, where working conditions are much better. Of course, there's still room for improvement. Sony ran into problems for overworking the animators on Across the Spider-Verse. But in the US, people don't jump off buildings just because they couldn't finish an episode on time. For Invincible to look better, they'd need to take at least 3 years between seasons, and they'd need to hire more people. But that's never gonna happen. With the insane—
You guys heard about the Chinese sweatshops, how they literally set up nets at the bottom because a lot of people were jumping off buildings. So literally, if you want to just end your life, you can't. You're just going through it. You just pretty much are a stunt coordinator. You're an indirect stunt coordinator. You're like, I'm done with this. You jump off and you land on a net, fracture your leg. Make sure you heal fast because you got to go right back to work the next day. Kind of sound like WWE as well back in the days.
Insane amount of content out there thanks to the streaming wars. Waiting 3 years for a new season is way too long. Invincible already risked losing relevance because of the long wait since 2021. If they kept doing that, people would just forget about the show. The ratings would tank, and Prime Video would cancel it before they even finished adapting the comic. Sure, there have been animated shows that made fans wait forever and still managed to stay popular, like Attack on Titan. They took 3 years to release season 2 and split the final season into a million parts, but the anime—
That's true, but with the animators on Attack on Titans, they actually switched animated studios. So funny enough, it's gonna be a bit of a hot take, but I actually prefer the first animated studio that was working on Attack on Titans, mainly because everything was hand-drawn animations, right? Especially with the Titan forms. But then when they moved on to the different studio that worked on the last seasons, the Titans was all 3D. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the 3D. However, the character designs look phenomenal, but I just didn't like the 3D element of it. I get it. You got to work smart. Drawing these, characters is overwhelming. So you got to cut corners. But that's my little hot take. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree.
It still kept its hype. But in the worst case scenario, Invincible could end up like Tower of God Season 2. Not even the animators' families watched that thing.
I'm not gonna watch it.
To make things worse, this is a really long series. Kirkman said he wants to do 7 or 8 seasons to cover the entire comic, so we're not even halfway there. If we had to wait 3 years between each season, the show wouldn't wrap up until 2037, if we're lucky. It's a shame that
Look, it can wrap up, but in my opinion, it needs. If a lot of people support Invincible, and they're doing that, by the way, with season 3, if it gets more notoriety, if it gets more popularity, then the good news is that they can then hire more people to outsource. That way, if there's more cooks in the kitchen, they're able to put out these seasons at a faster rate and better quality at the same time. So you get quantity and quality, once the more money starts coming in. So hopefully that'll be the answer. If not, it's like he said, it might even be to the point where the final season of Invincible, we're going to be old people walking around with a cane.
But Prime Video won't invest more in Invincible. With a bigger budget, the show could look way better, even if they wanted to release a season every year. It wouldn't be a visual masterpiece like Jujutsu Kaisen, but at least the fights would do the comic justice. And no one would say this is their favorite show despite the average animation. But the crazy thing is, despite all these production issues, Invincible has still managed to surpass Marvel and DC. We explain how he did it in this video over here.
Yeah, well, this was a great video by Mr. Head Canyon, all right? So I'm going to put the original, of course, down below. And if you want to check this out, go check this out. The Rise of Invincible, all right? Like I said before, guys, I do different character designs. So if you have any suggestions, right? Speaking of Jujutsu Kaisen, I've done Baki Hama, right? And many other anime. And I haven't really done a lot of like recent Western character designs. So shoot it down below, right? Whether it's Marvel, DC, doesn't matter. Anime, doesn't matter. Just let me know of any characters you guys want me to design in the future. All right. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next one. All right. Bye-bye.